Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com presents the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 215 of the Strength Coach Podcast, the official podcast of Michael Boyle, StrengthCoach.com, the world's best source for strength and conditioning information. Remember, you can try StrengthCoach.com out for 3 days, just $1. You'll have access to all the articles, videos, and programs, as well as the best forum on the net. It's the only place to have full access to Coach Boyle. He's on every day. Check it out at StrengthCoach.com. All right, I'm your host, Anthony Renna, and the show notes are located at ContinueFit.com. ContinueFit.com. You want to get in touch with me, shoot me an email to StrengthCoachPodcast@gmail.com. Quick reminder about the success series that I did. It was 5 audio interviews on achieving success in the fitness business with Coach Boyle, Geraldine Cooper-Smith, Alan Cosgrove, Don Saladino, and Ron McKeefrey. You can listen for free. You just need to sign up at ContinueFit.com. Check it out and let me know what you think. All right, today on the Coach's Corner, I spoke to Coach Boyle about a thread called tempo running programs, which we go really deep into. Also, his article and the interview that I did with him on success. That and much more coming up on the Coach's Corner in a little while. For the Results Fitness University Business of Fitness segment, Rachel Cosgrove is on to discuss reflection of how you've grown over whether it was the last 1 year, 3 years, or 5 years. Good stuff from Rachel. For the Functional Movement System segment, we have on Frank Dolan. He's going to continue his series on how he's using the functional capacity screen in his business. And Jim Kielbaso joins me for the Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach segment. Jim is the president and CEO of the IYCA. He's the director of total performance training in Wixom, Michigan. And he's the editor and contributor to Principles of Athletic Strength and Conditioning. He's on to talk about a blog post he wrote about a young girl who was forced to do splits. You might have seen that on social media. The impact a coach had on his son, how he has evolved as a coach, the book, Principles of Athletic Strength and Conditioning, and his specific chapter in the book, incorporating speed and agility into programming. So much more coming up with Jim as well. Lots of things to get to, so let's get on the phone with Coach Boyle. All right, now it's time for the Coach's Corner with Coach Boyle. Coach, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Ann. How are you?
All right, fall is here. In the Northeast, football started last night for you people. And by you people, I mean you people.
The undefeated season has ended.
Yes, there you go.
People hate me because I really struggle to be a Patriots fan because the fans themselves are such dinks. You know what I mean? It's like, oh my God, they can't, they just are, they're already, it's like, greatest team ever, undefeated all the way to the Super Bowl. And you're like, guys, we haven't played a game. Like, we haven't had a game yet. Not one, not uno. And, you guys are already at, the undefeated season. So.
Well, yeah, your talk radio is like New York talk radio, too. Like the sports talk radio. It's just out of control. I mean, people are nuts, man.
No, it is. It's absolutely stupid. You know what I mean? It's like, are you serious? Get a life. I mean, people, so just, I struggle to.
Yeah. Coach, I want to start off by, we're probably going to spend a lot of time on this because I want to go take a step back with it too. Abby, surprisingly enough, started a thread on tempo runs. And as with Abby, God bless him, is that for every question that he has, every time you answer with one, you won't answer one question, he comes back with 2, so it gives us a lot to talk about. But Coach, I want to go over tempo runs, and let's just take a step back for some people out there, because I think there seems to be some confusion. If you look at the definition, it says particular speed based on a maximal sprint effort of a given distance. So can you define, tempo runs, what we're talking about here?
I guess, and really you get into, there are, in the pure sort of track and field theory, we are really talking about what would probably be called extensive tempo versus intensive tempo. But the basic idea, and the way I like to describe it to people, is it's somewhere between sprinting and jogging. It's that whatever that space is. And, when you talk about like that MAS number, like that, the maximum aerobic speed is really the speed that you could maintain in a 5 to 6 minute time trial. So it's sort of like, depending on the person, it might be something slightly faster than your mile pace, something a little bit faster than your half mile pace. You try to arrive at that. And Dan, I don't know, I won't say it's not Dan Baker who coined the term, but Dan Baker probably has done more to popularize it. So that's why it's very, very big in rugby, this whole MAS idea. And so you've got to be able to look at this. And what happens is people misunderstand. Like, tempo is not like, it is a form of conditioning, and it would probably be best described as a form of moderate intensity conditioning. Maybe even, and that's why people said it would kind of fit on your low day. And, I don't know if it really qualifies as low intensity, but if you're thinking of things as high-low, if you're thinking of, sort of shuttles as high, you've got a time, you're working your ass off to make the time, versus tempo when you're saying to somebody, hey, I don't want that, sprint motor pattern. There's generally no change of direction in most cases, or if it is, it's not a hard change of direction. So it's sort of a what we would look at it if you looked at that complete sports conditioning thing that I did. We spent a lot of time on tempo. It's probably a way to anaerobically build your aerobic system, because you can accumulate periods of higher heart rate, sort of 60% and above, 120 beats a minute and above, without really beating somebody up. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it makes sense. Why, though? Okay, well, he was talking about, he had at first asked that he was talking to some coaches, and they like to progress the tempo run speeds from 100% MAS. So obviously you need the maximal aerobic speed numbers, right? And then they gradually increase running speeds up to 130 MAS for tempo runs by the 8th week. And then I guess you were talking about that's too high, because then now you're starting to talk about interval training if you're going up to 130, right?
Right. And I guess that's the difference. You've approached kind of an uncomfortable intensity when you start probably getting up around 130%. And that's not what you're really trying to do. And I think it goes back. I think, I always say we have the same conversations, you and I, on the podcast over and over again. And it's kind of like that. All right, we're back to the make sure you have the right tool for the right job. Make sure, as the Rob Rogers thing, make sure you're not hammering nails with the claw end. It's like, so you've got to look at tempo and realize you're not doing tempo to get that intense, 130% of MAS kind of effect. You're doing tempo more in the 110, 120, and it's kind of subtle. When, again, I wish some people had watched that whole complete sports conditioning. One of the things you realize is that MAS falls kind of somewhere in like a 4 to 5 meters per second sort of speed. And so you start looking at somebody saying, all right, that basically means somebody's running about 20 seconds for 100 meters. And you think, oh, that's not that hard. And that's the idea. It's not that hard. It's not, if you sprinted it, you'd be able to do it significantly faster. And if you jogged it, you'd do it probably substantially slower. And that tempo number would fall somewhere in the middle. And I always go back again, as I do, I use the same analogy sort of over and over again. I look at, I like to go back to the pornography in the Supreme Court. We know it when we see it, kind of thing. And so I think that's the difference. We talked about this in our staff meeting on Tuesday. We know it when we see it from a tempo standpoint. It's very, very easy to look at someone and say, no, that's not it, they're jogging. Or no, that's not it, they're running too hard. And it's not really that complex a thing to observe and to say, yeah, no, that's not quite what we were thinking. And I always feel like anybody who's kind of an experienced coach would look right away and be like, nah, that's not what I want. That guy's he's working way too hard to get what I want, to accomplish what I want. So we need to probably ratchet that down just a teeny bit, and then that'll be what we want.
Okay, and he was asking also about people like to do tempo runs in between skill work. Which really sounds like a bad idea.
Yeah, it is. And you're right. It sounds like a bad idea, and it is a bad idea. It's just dumb. And it's another one. And it's kind of what happens in these situations where everybody, it's like you take the right tool, and then there's always that coach who said, we're putting screws in. It's way faster if you just hit them with a hammer. And you're like, yeah, it kind of is, but it defeats the purpose. The screw's supposed to go in with a screwdriver for a particular reason. And if you hammer in, it's not the same thing. And that's kind of what we end up with very often in training, where I think we always kind of confuse intense with good. And so we're looking at stuff and saying, if it's really hard, it's good. And that, and the harder it is, the better it is. And the reality is that's not accurate. And that's where everybody kind of goes back to like the Charlie Francis thing, or even, now for us, the Tony Holler thing. Like, we want days, hey, if we're going to run fast, we're going to run really, really fast, like as fast as we can. On days that we're not going to run fast, we're not going to run fast at all, because that's not what we're looking for. And I think you can apply the same thought process to conditioning. There may be some days where you say, yes, for us once a week, particularly after week 3, I want there to be a conditioning day where it's hard and where you're uncomfortable and where you're sucking wind. But I really only want one of those a week. I don't want 4 or 5 or 6 of those a week. And I think that's, we've talked about, that's sort of one of the downsides of the whole CrossFit thing, is this idea that just, every day, hard as you can, every day, max reps, every day, max intervals. That generally does not end up creating a great final product.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff. One last thing on that, and he kind of was asking a little bit about this stuff with heavier athletes. Obviously, I think he's working with some rugby players, so this was why he was asking as well about the heavier athletes as opposed to lighter athletes.
Yeah, I think, again, I guess for me, I go back to simpler concepts. And, we've talked about this, why do goalies do what everybody else does in hockey? Why do the heavier guys have to do it with the lighter guys? When you're in this team sports setting, I think people really identify the inequities very, very rapidly. So when suddenly you're saying to somebody, oh, you don't have to work as hard, I think that very quickly creates problems where guys start looking and thinking, okay, why is this happening? Why am I running 100 yards and that guy's only running 80? And as I said, I think what I said in his response is that I get it. I understand the part about, the bigger guys, you may want them to not run as far. Like, there are some things in that thought process that actually do make sense. But we have to look at the bigger picture and say, does the additional, 20 yards or 20 meters, does that really make a difference? And, am I going to end up with somebody, this guy got shin splints because I made him do hundreds versus doing 80s? And does that then outweigh my sort of team dynamic thing that I'm more concerned about? And in my case, it does not. So I would look at that and think the team dynamic really matters to me. And so the fact that everybody sees that, okay, we all have to do the same thing, we're all being treated, at least. And I'm starting to get so tired of my own analogies, maybe because I hear them all the time. But it's it's the old Animal Farm thing. All animals are created equal. Some more equal than others. It's like you want to give everybody the impression that we're being equitable while potentially being inequitable. And you're already doing it. So if you said to these guys, I'd rather give them more time, because the perception, if I said, okay, if you're a heavier guy, then you've got 22 seconds to stride this 100 meters. If you're a lighter guy, you've got 20, and the real light guys have 18. Then everybody's like, okay, we all still have to run 100 meters. And I used to always say to guys, the reality is, if you're a bigger guy, you get punished. You got to run longer. You know what I mean? You're doing 4 more seconds than the other guy. So in effect, it looks like it's more work for you. But at the end of 10 times 100 meters, everybody's covered 1,000 meters. But if we looked at time, one guy might have done 180 seconds, one guy might have done 220 seconds. So one guy's more like, 3 minutes, and one guy's closer to 4 minutes. So, you could look at that and think, oh, that additional time is going to cause that guy to develop an overuse problem. I just don't happen to think so in that particular situation.
Yeah, and you're not doing this every day, so.
Right. And you're not, like I said, and it's not, the volume is really not all that excessive, particularly when you're talking about starting kind of your tempo stuff.
Yeah. All right. Makes sense. Good stuff. Coach, I just want to finish up with what was interesting was Keith Simmons, one of our members, had asked a few questions on the forum and about success. And it was kind of based off of Tim Ferriss' book, Tool of Titans. But at the same time, like 2 weeks before I had talked to you about, I was, my new site, Continue, and I was one of the ways to, if you sign up to the newsletter, you get 5 interviews and basically on success. I call it the Success Series, and I asked you to be part of that. We're not going to get too much into what we talked about there because obviously people have to sign up for it, and we want them to go on the site and read the article. But one thing I will say is that there's a theme with your answers, and it's really almost like you said about like karma. Like you were talking about, what's the quote? He had asked, what's the quote that you live? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And then, what's the billboard? The billboard for you would be pay it forward, give much, expect little. What's changed your mind? Karma. Last parting words. Try to be as good as you can. Help as many people as you can. Just expand on this idea. Do you feel like that was something that happened as you got older, or do you feel like that was always kind of it? Because I feel like, as long as I've known you for 15, 14 years, that's the way you've always kind of been. But was it something that you felt like you acquired, or did you feel like you always had that?
I think I always had it. I think it was part of my upbringing, but I don't know if I recognized it in the sense that, it was funny. I was talking to Carrie Burns, one of the women that works with me, and she was talking about how she had met some women that I went to high school with, and they were raving about my father and what a great guy my father was, and how many people my father took care of, and I just, you start to realize that this has been very much a part of our upbringing, but it may be a part that we didn't really acknowledge fully, and so I think for me it's more kind of the recognition of, hey, this is, yes, this was part of my upbringing. Yes, this is part of how I was raised. But I think as we get older, maybe you become more aware of sort of how much you are like your parents, or how much your parents have, impacted you, or even other people, how much, like, I always think about some of the coaches that I hated and what jerks they were, and how selfish they were, and how self-centered they were, and how it was always all about them. And realizing more and more, like, hey, that's not what you want to be. That's not what you want your legacy to be. That's not what you want on your tombstone. And I guess maybe it is an age thing as you start to get older and think like, hey, I may not be here forever, and I want to make sure that everybody understands the message. But as you said, I think I probably was kind of that way all along. But at the same time, I probably, when I was in my, you didn't know me in my 20s, probably didn't really know me in my 30s. And I think there were probably times at those points when I was maybe a little bit more selfish and a little bit more self-centered, and maybe it was a little bit more about me. And you hope that you can. I had a great exchange with one of our coaches the other day, and I was complimenting something that he did, and he said, "Well, it's a lot of the stuff that we did at MBSC in the beginning, in terms of the books that you made us read, and reading books like The One Thing, and reading books like Inside Out Coaching, and reading, some of the things that we've encouraged people to do has really helped them to have, I guess, a better, I don't know, maybe should I say my thought process is better than somebody else's thought process? I don't know. Maybe that's a little too, cocky, confident. But yeah, I do think, I guess it was there, but maybe not quite at the level that I thought it should be or wanted it to be.
Yeah. And it's funny. I was thinking about this the other day, about some of the books I do the Tell Me About That Book podcast now, and it's been great because, again, so many people in our industry are reading so many good books, and like you said, I mean, a lot of this has a lot of your stuff, like How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's always the book that you talk about, and there really is this. When you wrote that article, Certified Nice Person, about just always kind of being nice and giving back, and it's interesting. I kind of feel like, damn. I mean, even you, like with your morning rituals, Craig Ballantyne's Perfect Day book. It's funny. A lot of this stuff is I wish I was able to read in my 20s, and it's great. And that's why I feel like I wanted to do that podcast, or that's why I always ask about books, because I feel like I might have. Now I don't want to say I missed out. I'm glad I got to read them, but more books are coming out like that now. Not that they weren't there, but we have audiobooks now, and we have it's easier. I was reading Inside Out Coaching the other day on my phone, because I was somewhere, and I'm like, oh, let me just pull it up. It's so much easier and we have the access for these things.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it is easier, and I'll be honest. I think at one time, from a coaching standpoint, I think the pendulum swung, because I think when I was a kid, and I was very lucky, my father and my father's generation really were kind of the leaders of men generation, and they really did want to make people better people, and they really did want to have a positive impact. And then coaches started to get paid a lot of money and started to get a lot of attention and a lot of notoriety. And I think there was some maybe unintentional shifting of things where suddenly that stuff didn't matter. And the coaches started to adopt, kind of the Gordon Gekko business persona, where they became TV stars and used car salesmen. And it was all about, recruiting and being able to do a great interview. And it wasn't so much, there's less and less John Woodens floating around at the really high levels now, and there's probably a lot more used car salesmen. There's probably less Vince Lombardi types floating around, and there's a lot more of the kind of used car salesman type of guy. So I think hopefully we can help to swing the pendulum back a little bit and make people realize it's kind of like, for me, I'm always having that attitude of, hey, trust me, guys, it will come back and bite you in the ass. There will be a point where you'll look at this and, and you could look at it and think, in some ways, karma has caught up to Calipari, and karma has caught up to Rick Pitino, and karma, some of these guys have been embroiled in some scandals that have probably tarnished their reputation. And maybe those guys look at it now and think, hey, I probably should have done some things a little bit differently, 20 years ago or 15 years ago, whatever it was. And so I guess I think one of the things you want to do is sort of avoid putting yourself in the path of one of these karmic attacks where you're thinking, hey, am I eventually going to get caught on this? Am I eventually going to get found out? The fact that even in our field, that I was an internet phony or a plagiarist, or, there's so many of these guys now that steal stuff from other people and then have no problem throwing it out there on the internet and acting like they thought it all up. So I think somewhere along the way, a lot of these guys will start to, we'll start to figure it out, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I've really kind of been able to notice what's been good is, for me, and even with the new website and being, like with the Success Series, even being able to call people, and now I'm going to turn the whole thing into a book with 45 other people, and being able to call those people and kind of not cashing in on favors, but people are so willing to do it because I guess for a long time I've just been, we've been doing the podcast and we've been kind of providing all these resources, Strength Coach TV and all these things for coaches, and now they're easily, yeah, I'll do it, whatever you want. You got it. Here, you need a recommendation, you need a testimonial, you need an interview. Yeah, I'll do it. And it has come back, and that does feel good for sure.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. I think that's probably one of the big things that you do. You hope that everybody does kind of figure that stuff out and realize that you will. And I always feel like I'm a pretty good example of that, in the sense that I've got a really successful business. I am financially successful. I've got a nice family. There's lots of good things that have happened to me, and there is not like a bunch of people left in my wake where they're all like, yeah, well, these are all the people Mike screwed to get there, kind of deal. And you hope that other people can look at that and realize, wow, in some ways, I'm a great example of the fact that you can stay in the same city that you've always been in, that you don't have to move around, that you can have a good marriage, that you can have kids that hopefully don't have problems, and yet you can still be successful and still make some money. Because I think we maybe, as I said, I think sometimes you get into that, Wall Street, Gordon Gekko. Some people, again, you and I get the reference. Maybe some people might have to go back and watch the movie, but you hope that people will realize that it doesn't have to be that way.
Absolutely. Agreed. Good stuff. All right, Coach, I'll let you go on that one, and we will talk to you next time.
All right. Thanks, Ian. Appreciate it.
All right, hey, everybody, just a reminder, Perform Better right now. They're having their annual summer sale. It is at the end of the sale. September 30th is the date that they stopped at. Crazy prices. Everything's on sale. Biggest sale of the year. It goes on to September 30th. All the top sellers, mini bands, super bands, cook bands, test kits, Dynamax balls, rollers, mats, kettlebells, ropes, sandbags, TRX, you name it. Prices have been slashed. You can check it out at performbetter.com.
Hey everyone, it's Rachel Cosgrove, owner of Results Fitness and Results Fitness University with the Business of Fitness segment. So today I want to kind of give you a wake-up call and ask you to just reflect a little bit. Let's just reflect and think through the last year, the last 3 years, the last 5 years, and think about how have you grown? How have you changed? And if you haven't, then this is what I'm here to motivate and inspire you to do. We actually, over the last probably couple of years, a year or two, at Results Fitness. So continuing education, professional development, it's always been a part of Alan and my, really our secret to success is that we are never afraid to invest in our own continuing education and look for that game-changing idea. A couple of years ago, we'd kind of gotten stale. Our business, everything was going well, everything's going good. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, as a team, our team actually, as a whole, we all kind of, got stale. We hadn't been going to a lot of continuing education. And so we really ramped it up about, 3 years ago. We just totally ramped it up. Our entire team, we started to invest a lot in them ramping it up and just looking for, what is going to get us to that next level? What is that next game changer? And so everything from, our team went to, they've been to Strong First. They've gone through all the DVRT certifications. They've, really deep diving into some of the things that, that we've maybe seen at Perform Better, that we've been exposed to, but we hadn't really done a deep dive into. And so with your continuing education, if you start to think about, maybe you've been going to a lot of stuff, but you haven't picked one thing to really deep dive into, start to think about that, because that's where you can really start to, look beyond, that surface of what maybe you learned from maybe a speaker for an hour, and what do they do beyond that? What's that's just the skim of what they know. And so, this really was a game changer for us over these last 3 years, not just for our business, but for the mindset of our entire team and for Alan and myself. I actually attended a Darren Hardy seminar. We're always looking for things to reinvigorate us as well. And so, we also hired, another coach, looking for new ideas. And so this shifted our entire team, shifted our mindset. And so I just want to encourage you. Maybe you've been going to the same, seminars every year. Maybe you've always invested the same amount of money every year. You're kind of in a habit or in a, a routine of what you do with your continuing education and your professional development. So this is, just a wake-up call to start to think about how could you take that to the next level? How could you step that up? What seminars, what speakers, who have you really resonated with over the last few years, who maybe you could dive even deeper and really start to, look for that growth, at a whole nother level. And so just 3 questions for you as I wrap up this segment of the Business of Fitness podcast. Number 1, have you changed in the last year? Have your philosophies changed? Have you learned any new ideas? Have you been tested at all? Have you had yourself questioned at all? Have you questioned your own, philosophies and what you do? If not, start to think about that, because that's the kind of stuff that really pulls out, even better ideas. Number two, how have you grown? So if you do think that you've grown and you do feel like that you have made progress, in what way? And in what way, what direction are you going? And, because things do change. Our industry is changing extremely rapidly. And so to keep up, you do have to start to really think about, how am I growing? And, what do I need to do? And this comes to the third question, which is what's the growth that you need to have, or the skills that you need to learn that are necessary to get you to that next level. So, if a few segments back, I talked about the stages of your business. And, if you're looking to get that to that next level of your business, that next stage, what do you need to know? What do you need to learn? Who do you need to learn from? And, what can you do to make sure this year you really take that leap? This is really the year that you take a huge jump and really level, take that next level in your business, in your knowledge, and who you are as a fitness professional. So that's just, quick wake-up call for everybody. I hope this motivates you and inspires you to start thinking about those three questions. How have you changed in the last year? And if you have changed, then how? How have you grown? What have you learned? What skills have you learned? And then the third question, just what growth or skills do you need to learn, or what is necessary for you to get to that next level? So think those through, write those down, and hopefully that gets your mind going and get your wheels turning to start to think about some new ideas for you to take yourself to that next level. So thanks, everybody. And if you want to check out more, come on over to resultsfitnessuniversity.com or find us on social media on Instagram or on Facebook under Results Fitness University.
Hi, I'm Frank Dolan for the Functional Movement System segment. Last time we spoke about some of the benefits of the new FCS system and a little insight into each test. Although we utilize it with our members at our gym, who participate in group and semi-private training, we've also found it to be tremendously beneficial for working with teams. Today I'll talk about some of the logistics to implementing the testing with this population. In the past, we've tried, when we work with teams and doing screenings, we've tried to go out to their practice fields and or into their environment on a court. And a lot of times that takes up their practice time. It kind of gets in the way. And it also leads to this kind of like endless day of screenings where it's like kind of Groundhog Day where you're doing the same thing over and over again. So this year, we implemented a system where we were able to have each individual athlete get a link to either our online scheduling software, which we actually use MindBody, but you could probably use any other fitness software used for scheduling, or they link to our mobile app to be able to schedule themselves for an FMS and FCS appointment. So with that, we have open time slots for a coach and hopefully an intern as well to help out and learn, to be able to have 3 athletes book at the same time slot. We've found that we're able to get through the FMS and FCS and obviously talk about some of the benefits of the program and kind of introduce them to what we're doing within 1 hour. So that 60-minute appointment, they can book by themselves at their own convenience, and we do that all scheduled by appointment. If you don't have MindBody or some other type of scheduling software, there's a really great scheduling software called Calendly. That's CALENDLY and .com, and that's a way for you to get a really low-cost version for scheduling software. In this way, you're able to get them all to schedule on their own at their convenience and do that over a 1 or 2 week period, depending on the size of the team. From there, I think one of the other benefits is, one of the things with local teams is sometimes it's hard to market and get your name out there. So it helps to bring people into the facility, whether you're charging for this program, the team training program, or if it's something you just want to do to a local team you have a relationship with. It's a way to bring people into your facility or into your space to be able to get them to see your environment, see what you're about, and show that this is something very different from most of the other places probably in the area. So rather than go out to them, they come to us, they schedule through the app, and we can get them 3 at a time. Next time, we'll talk a little bit more about some of the soft systems in that meeting and that opportunity where they're seeing the facility and meeting the coach. But for now, we'll talk more logistics. So once they get through the three screens, it'll take a couple of days to send out a report based on how they do on the FMS and FCS. That's another touch point for us. We send out an email to each parent following the screen, asking them again to book a 15-minute consult with us by phone. This way we can talk through some of the results that their athlete had. And as I mentioned in the first episode here, we're finding that a lot of these high school athletes are having, obviously, functional movement deficiencies as well as some deficiencies on the FCS and these capacities. So we'll talk through where those weak links might be. And most of those conversations go very well because most of the time these parents intuitively know what you're talking about, they're actually seeing on the field. So it's a really good point to see that this is what the weak link is and where they need to work. Now, they may from there go on to train with you with the team, or maybe this could open up an opportunity for a semi-private or private training situation. But I think either way, it's a great way to get them at least screened and find out what they need to do. So from there, we'll deliver all our programming through Trainerize with these larger group and teams. Hopefully, if we're working with them once or twice a week, we can have them do their warm-up very custom to how they did on the testing. So it's a way to customize in a group setting. Next time, we'll talk about some of the soft systems. This is a way to ensure that they have a good experience with your business and also solidify some of the lessons from that and the things that we can learn from this type of testing. So that's going to, really help them trust the process and commit at the level that they need to actively see some change. Another little tidbit is if you want, you can download our testing sheet for the FMS and FCS. I'm going to have Anthony upload that to continuefit.com. This way you guys can have a version where it's all on one sheet. Thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right, now it's time for the Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach, and I have on Jim Kielbaso. He's the president and CEO of the International Youth Conditioning Association, the IYCA. He's also the director of the Total Performance Training Center. Make sure you check out Strength Coach TV. I went up and filmed Jim. He's coming out. This is probably in a couple days after I put this episode out. The books, Ultimate Speed and Agility was his first book, I think, and co-authored the Certified Speed and Agility Specialist Certification Curriculum for the IYCA, as well as the Ultimate Speed Mechanics and Ultimate Speed Drills products. He just edited and contributed to the new book, Principles of Athletic Strength and Conditioning. He wrote a chapter incorporating speed and agility training into programming. He's also the host of the Impact Show. You should check that out. It's a good podcast that's kind of talking about some different things. I listened to a couple episodes recently on him just all about writing the book, which I thought was interesting because, like Jim says in the show, a lot of us have a book inside of us. So it goes over that whole process. And then talked about one show about evolving, and I want to touch on that today. So Jim, thanks for doing this.
Dan, thanks for having me on, man.
All right, very good. I want to start, though, I want to take a step back with recently there was a video of a young girl who was kind of forced into doing splits, and it touched you enough to write a whole blog post for the IYCA blog. And I wanted you to go over this because I think you really touched on some things that just from this video, I think a lot of people would have just been like, oh my God, this is horrible. How can they make her do this? But I think you went really deep with this in the blog post about our role as coaches and how we are impacting them, young men and young women. It reminded me a little bit of Joe Ehrmann's Inside Out coaching as well, some of the messages that he's trying to get across. So talk to us about this video of this young girl doing splits and your blog post about it.
Sure. So as soon as I saw it, I thought, well, actually a friend of mine pointed it out to me and said, like, you need to say something about this, this is not okay. And when I first watched it, like I almost threw up. Like I was watching this girl screaming and crying and the guys pushing her down. And I thought, if this happened to my kid, what would be going on in my head? And then I watched over and over, and I watched all the other kids participating in it, and it just kind of all hit me. I was like, this stuff happens all the time, but to a much lesser degree. And coaches, they start, feeding this whole idea that listen to me, do what I'm saying, and they start focusing on just getting results and getting everybody to be able to win the game or do the splits or whatever it might be. And we don't think about what is this going to do to this kid down the road. And I watch, high school or middle school coaches sometimes doing things where the kids aren't getting hurt right there on the spot. Like this girl was, she probably sustained an injury like acutely right there on the spot. Something bad happened. Like that was not a good scene. But most of the time, when you see coaches trying to get kids to lift more weights and get up on a record board, and it's just terrible technique on a squat or a deadlift or a clean or whatever it is. And, the kid might not get hurt right there on the spot, but what kind of long-term damage is that kid being set up for? And I've seen it. I mean, I've talked to kids who, have back problems because of what they did, or, they're now in college and they're still, that's pretty young, and they'll come back and tell me, I think what I did in high school messed me up and I haven't been the same. Or, when a kid tells me, I haven't been the same since whatever. And that just breaks my heart. And because most of the time, what the game changer didn't really produce like tremendous results. Like who cares that you deadlifted, 20 pounds more? It's not like you're anywhere close to a world record. So you got your name on the board for the 10th place deadlift at that school that year. And now, you can't wake up in the morning without back pain. Like that's not worth it to me. And I see my own kids going through things, and, from the emotional or psychological standpoint of that, kids get sports experiences ruined for them. There's a stat out there that I think it's 75 or 80% of kids who specialize early in sports end up quitting sports by like age 14. And a lot of times I think it's because, the coaches think it's about them and becoming, having a great record, or like I said, getting all the kids to do the splits. When in reality, most kids, we need to look at sports as a way to, really make an impact on the kid and help them turn into young men and women who are then going to be successful adults and have great experiences and bonding with their teammates and enjoying the process of getting better each day and and improving and developing confidence. When we make kids do things that aren't going to like have a huge positive impact on them, I think we need to step back and think about what we're doing. And I thought it was really interesting that you referenced Joe Ehrmann there, because he's kind of been a big influence of, for me too. And I heard him say once in a live talk he did, he said, when you see a kid mess up on the football field and the coach is on the sideline just screaming and yelling at him, he said, that coach is not screaming and yelling at that kid for making a mistake. That coach is screaming and yelling at himself for not being able to make it happen when he was younger. And he's taking his frustration out on this kid in front of everybody. And that just really hit me hard when he said that. Like, what are we doing? Like, why are we getting mad at kids for making mistakes when they didn't mean to make the mistake? Maybe we didn't coach them well enough. And is yelling at that kid going to help that kid make the play next time? Or do we need to approach it differently and just teach the kid what to do? And I don't know. The video just brought a lot of stuff out, a lot of emotions out in me and probably other people. And it kind of got a lot of people talking about it on social media, which I was glad to see, because I think that we don't stop things often enough. We get scared to call people out or say something or speak up, and the kids do too. because once the kids, the kids kind of buy into a loud, overbearing coach, and they think like, okay, well, I'm going to be this coach's supporter or lackey or, whatever you want to call it. And then they buy in, and all of a sudden when something bad happens, kids look around and think, am I crazy? Like, is this really happening? Should I say something? No, I can't say anything because then I'll get yelled at. And what will the other kids think? And they kind of lose perspective and that ability to actually speak up and say something, which you saw in the video too.
Yeah.
What did you think of it?
Well, first of all, I didn't watch it. I couldn't. I was like, there's no way. Especially you had like the disclaimer. You're like, you can't unwatch this. And I'm like, and I'd seen it on social media before. But for me, just reading and, hearing about it, obviously I know what happened in the video. Just from the descriptions. And one of the things that I was kind of thinking as well, and again, just having recently reread Inside Out Coaching, was the impact that's going to have on some of those other kids when they become coaches, right? That's the way I did it, right? This is the way I did, this is the way I grew up. And Joe talks about that in the book because, you can't always blame them because they don't know any better and they're afraid. And then they just think, well, this is how it is. This is just basically how it works. And I think, like you said, it ruins sports for kids, and it's like it's not that important. Like the actual play. It's not that important that you're yelling at the guy or whether they win or lose. It's the whole experience. It's that team, being a part of a team and understanding that you're a piece of something and that you're not bigger than the team. There's so many there's a billion lessons we can learn from sports, and then we got this guy on the sidelines going bananas, and it's just sad for me that I'm like, okay. That's also going to make those other kids a bad coach because I'm afraid in a couple of years, a couple of them are going to be a cheerleading coach, right? And then they're going to be doing the same thing. Yeah.
I mean, it goes on in specific sports more often, than some of the mainstream sports, but like gymnastics and dance and cheer, like you hear about, like I had a bunch of messages from people saying, thank you for saying something. This still happens in this gym or whatever. And kids get hurt all the time. And because like you're just talking about, well, that's what I did. So that must be the right way to do it.
Brutal. I love Coach Boyle always calls it, I hate to say it, it makes me cringe just to repeat this, but Coach Boyle is always like, figure skating and gymnastics are controlled child abuse. Not all of it is. I mean, we still want our kids to get into some of these things, but I think it meant on the kind of the elite level when these kids are or think they're elite, right? We were talking about that in the in our youth training roundtable that we did for Strength Coach TV and Strength Coach Podcast was that there's no such thing as elite, and you guys are like, yes, there is. Their parents called me the other day. So,
it's funny that you said that because my middle son did gymnastics growing up, especially when he was younger, and his coach was a Bulgarian guy who was on the the Bulgarian Olympic team, and he was just a really special coach. And when you see the impact it has on your own kid, like having a great coach, you realize, what a dynamic having a good or bad coach brings to an entire family. And this guy was just special. And he made my son feel special, and my son was dynamite. Like everybody just assumed, this kid, he's going to the Olympics or he's going to be in Cirque du Soleil. Like he's a freak. And he was killing it. And this guy, unfortunately, he passed away. He had a heart attack while he was driving, and he died. And the devastation to my kid immediately was absolutely heartbreaking. But they tried to bring in a young guy afterwards, but he wasn't equipped for that. And then they brought in another guy, and I could just see quickly my son was just not the same. He wasn't the same at all in gymnastics. And he said one day, like after a meet, like a year or year and a half later, after his coach had passed away, my wife said, it seems like you don't even know what's coming up in your routine, which is really weird in gymnastics. And he said, he finally admitted it. He goes, Mom, like my whole life, I heard Peter talking me through my entire routine. He started me out with he said something to me, and I could hear his voice, and he said, I can't hear it anymore. And I knew right then, I was like, this is over. This isn't, he's done, and the coach had that big of an impact on him that, you can't even recover when that coach is gone. And I don't think coaches all the time understand what an impact it has on kids and their families, because we talked about it at home all the time. Like it impacted my son's life and, how he acted at home and in school. And I'm sure it has the same impact on that girl in the video. It's probably changing everything at home. They're probably talking about this nonstop. And, I just think that we forget, we forget how on an individual level things actually make a difference.
Yeah. And I worry even in the home, because sometimes things are happening out there and then the parents are kind of like, oh, come on, Jimmy, suck it up. I mean, your coach, he's an adult and he knows what he did. You're exaggerating, blah, 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 right? And stuff like this is happening out there. It's just crazy. So,
and you know what? What's hard about that, and that's a great point you made, sometimes that's true.
Yeah.
Sometimes kids do need to just suck it up. Like, yeah, if your coach asked you to do something that's kind of hard, but not it's not unrealistic. Like, yeah, just do it. And I coached my little guy's soccer team, and last week we had two parents. He's 9, okay. And two parents came up, and they're awesome parents, but they both came up to me and said, "Oh, my son's got this issue going on, so he might not be able to do everything today." And they both, said this, and I was like, "Okay, well, let's just see how it goes." Well, the kids get out there and they're fine. And they're running around and nothing's wrong. And I kept asking them, like, is your ankle hurting or is your hip hurting? No, I'm fine. And I think that, sometimes as parents, we do overreact. We don't want our kids to get hurt. And then other times we underreact. And with social media now, you see all these things and people get freaked out. They think that, we don't know how to react to things anymore. So I don't know. It's just an interesting observation that I've had, from seeing stuff happen for so long.
Well, let's segue this into evolving as a coach, because I was listening to your podcast on the Impact Show, and I thought it was really interesting. Kind of made me think a little bit. Even you were saying, like, pause this right now and just sit down and write some things about how maybe you've evolved as a coach, but. Were you that guy kind of growing, like, early on in coaching in the 90s? You started really coaching in the 90s. Mm-hmm. Were you that guy where, you said you had a little bit more anger in you, and you didn't have kids at the time, obviously. Mm-hmm. So were you that guy? Have you evolved into this? Like, you're not saying, oh, I've been this great coach for 20 years.
Yes, I was that guy. And, I look back on it. It hit me. Maybe I said this in that podcast. I don't remember. It was about a year or so after I got out of college coaching, and I was driving through the neighborhood where I used to coach all the time in Detroit. And I stopped at this light, and I had this like deja vu experience where I thought every day I would sit at this light, like just pissed off. Or if I was going the other way and going into work, I would be pumping myself up to be pissed off and to, like, I have to either act angry, be angry, or be about to be angry. And I looking back, I feel like I balanced it because I still have very close relationships with a bunch of the kids that I coached in college. And, I had two sides. I developed strong relationships with them, but I don't know that I'd be able to go back and do it the exact same way now, because I would handle it differently, both the training aspect and the and some of the approach. Now I do feel like kids are able to mature and grow a lot when they're in a college type setting with somebody that's hard on them, because there's no escape. So they have to learn how to adapt, and they have to learn how to overcome and get tougher and push themselves to places that they otherwise wouldn't on their own. But yeah, I'm sure I said things to kids that, now I'd be like, okay, settle down. You don't have to get in a fight with a kid just because he, had 30 pounds around his waist on chin-ups instead of 35. Like, it's not worth getting in a physical confrontation with a kid over that. But that's kind of how I was. And I look back and think, wow, that kid probably hated coming into the weight room. So yes, I have changed quite a bit.
Yeah, and I think I'm glad that you had that experience, though, because it makes you, to me, a better president and CEO of the IYCA, kind of coming from that experience. And I feel like for me, with kids, I was always really good with kids because my dad, who's like super loving and I have a great relationship with my dad, he always like spoiled us, whatever. But like just with hockey, he was a little crazy. Like he didn't even know the sport. Like I introduced him to the sport.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like 9 or 10 and he'd be like yelling at me about stuff. And I was thinking as a kid, it did affect me a lot. And I didn't always love playing games because I was worried that after the game I was going to get yelled at, Mm-hmm. So, but I don't blame my dad, too, at the same time, believe it or not, because I feel like my dad didn't really know any better either, Mm-hmm. He was just kind of the way he grew up, and he didn't have that education that I had or that exposure that I had. He didn't have any money and, didn't get to play the sports like I got to play or et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I feel like that experience really does help me as a coach as well, and I think help me evolve. So yeah, good stuff.
Oh yeah. I think if you haven't had that experience, that intense experience, then you don't know, how different it can be. And people today when I tell them kind of what I just told you, they're like, what? No way.
Yeah. You don't seem like the type.
We can't. Yeah. There's no way you swore at kids or yelled at them or anything. And I think today I use it differently because if I'm usually in a pretty good mood now, and even with like say our combine guys, so they're older guys. If I'm in a good mood and it's all instructional in nature, but if something makes me mad and I stop and have a talk with them, it's like, whoa, like, he must be really upset. Like, we got to listen to this now. Whereas I think if you're doing it every day, people kind of tune that out. So, it's just kind of learning how to use the ups and downs, just like actors learn how to, sometimes you have to talk real quiet and people kind of move in, and then other times you're talking loud and, and it's kind of a show effect almost, to get a different reaction out of people.
Absolutely. I think Nick Winkleman has been on the show so many times, like doing the art of coaching, and talked a lot about that, about, timing the different tones in your voice. So very cool. Good stuff. Jim, let's move on to the new book. Not so new, but yeah, it's new.
Yeah, it's
Principles of Athletic Strength and Conditioning. It's the foundations of success in training and developing the complete athlete. You edited it with Toby Brooks, and you also contributed to it. And this is an IYCA book. Give us an overview of the book before we get into your chapter.
Okay. I am like super pumped about this book. This project took over a year to actually make happen. And basically what we did is I got 17 pretty amazing elite coaches to contribute to the book, and pretty diverse background. There's a lot of college, like D1 college guys, but there's also a couple of high school strength coaches. There are a couple of private facility strength coaches. There's a PhD. There's a doctor of physical therapy. I kind of tried to, there's an NFL strength coach. Like I tried to kind of get everybody in it to more or less create a real practical yet evidence-based, if you will, or kind of like science-backed book that takes people through kind of all phases of building an athlete. So it starts off, talking about basic science stuff like anatomy, physiology, energy systems, but then it gets more into like warm up and then program design. And Mark Naylor from University of Michigan did an awesome chapter, very thorough on program design. But then there's stuff on explosive training and jump training and a lot of the training stuff, but true to what I'm trying to do by building kind of a bridge between just training and also making an impact on people. Ron McKeefrey did a chapter on motivation and leadership in coaching, which is a little different. Like you don't usually get that in the science-based or training-based books. And then Rob Taylor had an awesome chapter called 25 Ways to Make an Impact. And it was basically just like quick tips on, here, do this, try this to really make a difference in a kid's life and in their training experience. So I thought it came together really, really well, and the feedback I've gotten has been fantastic too.
Yeah, I love the way you put the book together. I do, and I think some of these things, like you said, like something like having Ron in there with the motivation is kind of pretty cool, and touching on, like, there's certainly plenty of programming in here, and understanding how to, like, organizing sessions, etc. Good samples, and we got to use our brains. It's not the be all end all, like we said. You said in the book. Use this as a guide, not just a you're going to go out and do this program right away. But let's talk about your chapter is incorporating speed and agility training into programming. And you and I were talking before. I had Tony Holler on the show a couple episodes ago talking about speed training. And and we had that great thread on strengthcoach.com that you were part of as well. Talk to us about this idea. Foundations of speed and agility development for you. You said there was 5 basic concepts. What I also loved, I'm like, Jim put strength third. You were talking about learning technical movement mechanics and practice them until they are second nature as first. And then the athlete should perform movements with maximum intensity, resting long enough between repetitions to ensure maximum intensity on every rep. And Tony Holler, that's right up what Tony Holler was saying. So can you give us an overview of your foundations of speed and agility development?
Sure. Well, it sounds like you've got the book right there, because I think you were just reading from it. So you can correct me if if I mess anything up on these things where you're asking me about. But I think that the place to start is teaching athletes mechanics. There's lots of really good, solid scientific research now showing that faster people run differently. They have different mechanics than slower people, and I have seen differences in kids. Just if you teach them acceleration mechanics, I mean, you can make a 1 to 2 tenth of a second difference in their 10-yard dash just almost instantaneously when they change their mechanics. Now, I am not suggesting that everybody runs like a robot and everybody runs exactly the same, or should even be like thinking about how they're running by the time they actually have to compete. But there are things that we can change to help kids enhance their speed. So I think that's a great place to start, because a lot of kids don't learn that anymore. It's not taught in phys ed. Most sporting situations, they're working on sport skills, and very few people are teaching kids, mechanics like acceleration mechanics. So that, I feel like, kind of falls onto our laps, and I felt that way for years. And it seemed like 10 or 15 years ago, strength coaches just wanted to lift weights, and now we're turning more into movement type people. So I like that's changed. So that's the first thing. Second thing is like you just alluded to, and Tony Holler said the same thing. If you're going to get faster, you have to be able to perform the movement. Let's say you're working on acceleration. You have to accelerate as hard as you can, and then you have to rest long enough so that the next rep you can give 100% effort on. If you're trying to give a maximal effort over and over and over and over again, the actual intensity is going to start to drop pretty quickly because of fatigue. So you have to give them time to rest. That's training speed and doing conditioning are two different things. And I think a lot of times coaches will kind of mix those two up. And so they'll do their speed training while they're tired, and they'll say things like, well, I need my kids to be fast while they're tired too. Well, I understand that, but if you're not fast when you're fresh, you don't even need to worry about being fast when you're tired. Yeah. First work on being fast and then work on being able to do it over and over again. The third aspect was to develop strength, and that was basically to help increase force production. And that is more seen in acceleration than it is at top end speed and deceleration. So for team sports, it's going to have maybe more application than for track, where, once you get up to speed, you're not breaking it down and changing directions and re-accelerating and jumping and doing all these things. But, strength is definitely a component. The fourth component to speed is developing power. So you have to first you have to create a lot of force. Then you have to create a lot of force as quickly as possible into the ground, and it has to be put into the ground in the right direction. And if you can put the force into the ground fast in the right direction, you're going to run faster. And so we have to not just be strong, but we have to be able to put the force in the ground quickly through doing explosive type training and plyometrics and stuff like that. And then the last thing is what I already kind of talked about. Once they already are fast and have good power, then you have to condition them and teach them, appropriate sports kind of movements so that they can actually apply it on the field. It's no good to be, fast and you can only run one 10-yard sprint and then you're tired. You have to be able to do it over and over in a game. And you also have to be able to do it in a way that works within the context of the sport. So after you've taught them all these things, you eventually have to get them in good enough shape so that they can take advantage of it. Does that lay it out for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. Yeah, you followed the plan, and it's in the book. I got it right in front of me.
Perfect.
Jim, we've had some interesting guests on lately. Jacques Devore, who wrote the book Maximum Overload for Cyclists, and he's talking about, that's an endurance athlete, but he's been working with other athletes too, and this idea of what he calls mini sets with rest. So and this is where the monitoring really kind of is important. Once they get down 10%, he stops because he's like, look, now we're just practicing. It's poor practice, and you were talking about that as well. It's not just about practice. It's more, I guess we can go to Anders Ericsson and talk about deliberate practice, right?
Yeah.
Perfect practice.
Yeah. Exactly. You have to practice it the way you want it to be done so that they get, so kids get good at that. They need enough reps of good technique so that their body learns that that's what you want it to do. And our nervous system learns in a pretty cool way. Every time you do something, it thinks that that's what it's supposed to get better at. So it starts laying down that track, if you will. And, the theory is that if you move one way, your nervous system lays down more myosin to make that neural impulse stronger. Well, if you then switch it up, then your body starts thinking, oh, maybe that's the way I'm supposed to go. So, if you keep confusing it, it never learns how to do anything really well. And that's why it's so important that at a young age, we are teaching kids, how to do things, and not in a robotic way. Again, I got to make sure that I emphasize that we're not teaching kids how to be robots, but they need to learn how to move and do it in a somewhat efficient manner, so that as they get stronger and bigger, they're able to do it with more efficiency.
Yeah, we actually had Jonathan Beverly wrote Your Best Stride. And again, that's a little bit more for some people who are running like more longer distances. But what was interesting, and I think the analogy to golf was very similar, because what a lot of golf pros end up doing is teaching people, let's say, okay, Tiger Woods swing, right? Great swing, and you want to look like Tiger Woods. But you can't do that if you don't have Tiger Woods' body, or if you're not the same size, etc. So what he's talking about is, look, you can't be robotic because everybody's body is different. And so what I liked about Jonathan Beverly was that he was saying, look, you gotta work on the corrective exercise. You gotta understand that their body has to be able to do the things that you're trying to get them to do, and that everybody's gonna have a different running style, and that you can't just fall in. There's obviously traits that we want to see, but they're not. It's not set in stone.
Yeah, and I follow that same philosophy in the sense that when we're training guys, say for the 40-yard dash for the combine, I tell them right up front, look, you guys are not track athletes. I'm not trying to turn you into track athletes, but if you're trying to run as fast as you can, we might as well learn what we can from the fastest people in the world and how they do it. And for example, if the fastest times ever recorded, athletes start off taking, long, powerful strides to create more momentum and to overcome inertia faster, then maybe we should be doing that too. Don't take little dinky steps coming out of the gate. And I explain, I don't expect you to do it like Usain Bolt, but let's learn from him. And it's probably the same way, with Tiger Woods. You don't have to do it just like Tiger Woods, but if your swing is terrible now, well, let's at least look at kind of like how he's doing it and try to get you a little bit in that direction.
Yeah, and then you could say, okay, look, the best golfers in the world have an X factor, so their hips are turning X amount and their upper body's turning another amount. Let's try to get your body to be able to do that then. At least we know from, the best golfers in the world what that looks like. Now we know what you look like through testing. Let's try to get you better in the gym and work on that through some patterning. Because I really believe in, like you do in sprinting, it's the same thing in golf. So many guys come in and say, all right, my hip turn isn't that great in the golf swing. And then we'll work on hip mobility. We'll work on a pattern of hip rotation without the golf club in our hand. Mm-hmm. And I tell them, I'm like, look at your karaoke, look at your wall drill, look at your baseball swing. You're moving your hips first. You're initiating the movement with the hips. You know how to do it. Mm-hmm. Now you have to learn to do it with a golf swing, and that's going to take a long time. It's why it takes them so long, even the best golfers in the world, and they disappear for 6 months. You're like, hey man, where's that guy been? He won a couple tournaments. No, he changed his swing. It takes a long time to reprogram those engrams.
Absolutely. Well, and I know we were talking about this earlier, but that leads right into the difference then between, and this is kind of what I've been excited and doing a lot more of, is not just training the exact thing that like a golf swing, but in most sports there's a reactive component to it, and there's now research out showing that the way athletes move when they are on offense versus defense are very different, and you have to react to somebody versus essentially dictating the movement. Like if you're on offense, you get to kind of dictate the movement, so you have to be able to move one way, whereas a defensive player has to be able to watch what the other player's doing and then react to it. And I like to set them up first with teaching them how to move, so when they react, they're then moving with better mechanics. But we've been doing some really cool, I'll call them like reaction type of drills, where we're teaching or letting kids kind of go one-on-one with no ball or anything, and then they just have to, the defensive players have to react and chase them down. And it's really fun to watch people, like that. A lot of kids don't have any moves. Like they just they haven't learned them yet. So it gives them the opportunity to do that if you're an offensive player. And then defensive players, it's like we throw them in practice situations where they have to do it in a game, but we never let them just focus on, hey, let me kind of read what this person's doing and how people move, so that they start thinking about it a little differently. And that's been really fun, doing that with kids.
Is this what you were talking about with reaction time versus response time?
Yeah, it was both reaction time, response time, and then the opened and closed skills. So, a closed skill is something that doesn't require any change or decision making in the middle of the actual, like, you don't have to react to anybody. So a golfer, you don't, the ball's sitting there, you're not having to react in the middle of your swing to like somebody throwing a punch at you. Like once you initiate the swing, you can do it without interference. Same with running. You're not the other person. Yeah, you're competing against him or her, but they're not making you react in a way that you're like changing your direction or your path. Yeah. Versus an open skill is more, reaction based. Your movements are dependent on what you're seeing and feeling from your opponent, and you have to do something. You have to change what you're doing based on that. And then the response time and the reaction time. The response or the reaction time is how quickly you actually initiate the movement. So you have to see what's going on or feel it and then make the right choice. But the response time includes the reaction plus your ability to actually move and get to where you need to be or make your body do something. And those are two totally different things. And I think a lot of times we focus as strength coaches so much on the responses, like we have to move fast and be strong. But if kids don't know how to read what's going on and react appropriately to them, you've got a really fast kid out on the field that looks slow because he's out of position all the time. And, or they don't know how to read a person on defense so that, they're getting juked left and right. So you have to kind of know who you're working with and what they need. And, it's been fun to find kids who you just kind of recognize, this kid's fast or slow, whatever it is, but they just need to work on reading another human being and doing that. And it's been pretty cool.
Very cool. Jim, let's just finish up with, in one piece of your book, you have 4 factors of an effective speed training program, and then the keys to enhancing speed. But let's talk a little bit about keys to enhancing speed. Just some of the things, like we were talking about before, there's no, everybody's going to be different, but, you were talking about like just with the foot strike and maybe some, the way the lean and the knee drive, et cetera. Can you just kind of go over some things you like to see?
Sure. Well, a lot of times in team-based sports and in enhancing speed, a lot of it is acceleration. So it's about kind of creating angles into the ground to like I said earlier, the first thing is you got to put a lot of force into the ground as quickly as you can in the right direction. So we got to teach the kids how to put it, like what direction is going to send them, in different ways. So I oftentimes will teach, or just say like, who's taking physics, and if I push in the ground this way, which way am I going to go? And they'll start to get it. So if we want to run forward, we have to essentially push backwards, and teaching them how to strike the ground backwards, how to get their knees up so that they cover ground, how to have their foot cocked, or we say dorsiflex, but kids don't. So we have to have their foot cocked and loaded, and so that their ankle is ready to put that force in the ground and then receive the reaction to it. So just teaching kids kind of the basics of how to move, I think, is really important first. And then, we got to get them stronger, but Tony Holler was saying kind of the same thing. And Tony and I kind of went back and forth a couple times that you need to get strong enough to complete the movement and to do it with good power, but any strength on top of that, you may be wasting time, and you may be wasting recovery time and just creating more fatigue in a kid so that they can't then practice the speed stuff. So the timing of it that's what I thought was fascinating about that whole thread on strengthcoach.com. Was the fascinating part on that was that it kind of came out that Tony does want the kids to be stronger, but he just doesn't want them to fatigue themselves from the strength training during the track season, because then they can't run fast because they're tired or sore or whatever it is. And I see that in kids all the time, especially in our combine prep program, where I kind of have, it's kind of a laboratory. I can control all aspects of it. If we hammer the kids' legs on Monday, on Tuesday, Wednesday, and even Thursday, they don't have what they had before their legs were sore. So if you do that week after week after week, are you really allowing them to practice their speed ever totally maximally fresh? Kind of like what we talked about earlier with the factors of speed. You got to be fresh to do it 100%. If you and I go and do a hard squat workout right now, are we going to really be able to run fast tomorrow? I know I'm not. I know maybe you are. I don't know, but I'm not going to be able to. And kids often don't understand how that fatigue affects them. I'll have a lot of kids come in and they know they're about to get tested, and they run their 40 or whatever it is, and then they tell me, "Oh yeah, I'm kind of sore. I did a squat and deadlift workout yesterday." And in my head, I'm always thinking, "Did you not think that was going to affect you?" But kids don't really get that. Yeah. But so anyway, there's a timing to that, and then the improved explosiveness. We've got to teach kids how to apply force into the ground quickly, and then how to break it down for deceleration, and where to place the feet, and how to lean their body. And again, not in a mechanical standpoint, but kind of demonstrating what certain things should look like, and then letting them practice. Sometimes the lights kind of go on for kids, and then you let them kind of play a game that allows them to practice that to bring it to life.
Very cool. Well, earlier I said to you we should have pressed record because we talked for like a half hour before, but I'm glad we didn't. It's been 45 minutes. People would have been yelling at me for too long. But
it would have been way too long.
But Jim, thanks so much for coming on and talking about principles of athletic strength and conditioning. And I want to remind everybody, check out the Impact Show podcast. Jim is doing some great stuff. He has a lot of great guests on there as well, and they're talking about some different things and how we can make an impact. So Jim, thanks so much for doing this, and keep fighting the good fight, bud.
My pleasure, Anthony. Thanks for having me on again, man.
All right, well, that's going to do it for episode 215 of the Strength Coach Podcast. Special thanks to Chris Pryor and the folks over at Perform Better. Remember, they are having their annual summer sale. Only a couple weeks left. Crazy blowout prices. Sale prices on really almost everything. It's their biggest sale of the year. It goes through September 30th. All the top sellers, kettlebells, sandbags, TRX, you name it, prices are slashed. You can check out performbetter.com for all their products and info on their educational seminars. Thanks to Coach Boyle and Jim Kielbaso for sharing their insights and philosophies into the world of strength and conditioning, performance enhancement, and training the young athlete. Rachel Cosgrove for the Results Fitness University Business of Fitness segment. Check them out at resultsfitnessuniversity.com. Frank Dolan for the Functional Movement System segment. Check them out at functionalmovement.com. Remember, you can try strengthcoach.com out 3 days just to buck. You'll have access to all the articles, videos, and programs, as well as the best forum on the net. It's the only place to have full access to Coach Boyle. He's on every day. Access that offer at strengthcoach.com. Click the Join Now button to get started on your trial. My name is Anthony Renna. Go to continuefit.com and sign up for the Success Series, 5 audio interviews on success in the fitness business. It's where you'll find the Strength Coach Podcast, Stopping at Me 20 podcast, Tell Me About That Book podcast, Strength Coach TV, and so much more. Thanks again, and I will speak to you next time.